Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Benjamin Cure Show on this Monday, December 30th, 2024. We have got a great one, a jam-packed episode today. Decided to take last week off, spend it with the family, make them the priority during Christmas. So I hope you all enjoyed the week with your family and had a great holiday season. This is the last show of 2024 before the start of the new year. We have so much to talk about. The NFL postseason is upon us. We're in the middle of the college football playoff right now. We have a lot to address, and I want to get to it. And I might even touch upon something that I saw in combat sports. You saw the headline this weekend because everybody freaked out. Has to do with Conor McGregor and Logan Paul. What a massive number. We'll get into that later on in the show. But I want to start first with a primetime game on Sunday Night Football. Jayden Daniels, Michael Penix. What a game between the two. Atlanta Falcons, Washington Commanders. Comes down to overtime and a game-winning drive led by Jayden Daniels. He was a perfect 3-3 or 5-for-5 on his completions down the stretch there. Led them with a touchdown drive. Zach Ertz, that was a catch. I know it looked a little weird, but look at the replay. I thought initially when it happened, I was like, oh, they're going to reverse that call. But once you see the replay, that was a touchdown. And Zach Ertz was, of course, very complimentary towards Jayden Daniels at the end of that game, talking about how he is so appreciative of the fact that he gets to play with such a great quarterback here at the end of his career. A really humbling moment, a real moment of realization for Zach Ertz, and I'm sure for Jayden Daniels too. Let's talk about the main story here, and I'm going to get into the Raheem Morris not taking the timeout when he had two in a second. But first, Jayden Daniels. To me, the numbers may not support it, but I believe Jayden Daniels is an elite quarterback, and the numbers may not support this. The numbers aren't sexy when you look at them. They're not flashy. Didn't have a 300-yard passing yard game, but Jayden Daniels had 258 in the air, had 3 touchdowns, including the game-winning drive, scored 22 points in regulation to lead them back. When you look at Jayden Daniels, it's not just the fact that I think he's already one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. To me, he's probably top 5 or 6 already. The more important point to be made, I think, is that Jayden Daniels is a closer. You put him in the class of Ray Allen. You put him there with Patrick Mahomes. You put him there with Tom Brady. When I think of closers and guys who are great in the clutch, I throw Jayden Daniels in the mix already because Jayden Daniels has already shown us in his rookie season down the stretch here how good he is under pressure. He is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best right now under pressure, and it's not particularly close. I love Patrick Mahomes, and I love what I've seen from him in the postseason. I think he's going to turn it on, and we've already seen that. But right now, currently, as it stands, Jayden Daniels is the most dangerous closer at the end of these games. He has the highest clutch gene we've seen in any player since Patrick Mahomes, and before that, since Tom Brady. He is a different breed. And Washington Commanders fans were chanting the owner's name yesterday, Josh Harris, in the middle of the game. He deserved it because that franchise has totally turned itself around under new leadership, new ownership, and it has to do with the fact that they drafted Jayden Daniels. And I think so many people during the draft process, which will be upon sooner than we think here in April, will say, you know what, that team needs a quarterback, but they also need to draft a better offensive line. They've got to get a tackle. They need weapons. Jayden Daniels is living proof that a right quarterback can change everything for your franchise. It can go night and day. You look back to the year before in the NFL draft process, C.J. Stroud, we thought the Texans were a tire fire, and all of a sudden they've turned things around, and this season was definitely not an easy one for them. I don't know if it was a sophomore slump for C.J. Stroud. I would also definitely blame the offensive line woes and the injuries on the fact that he wasn't as productive because he doesn't have as much time to throw or process or make decisions. But man, when you look at the past 2 years, and this is real interesting, we now have 2 years in a row, which is not a huge sample size, but it's weird that it's happened twice in a row. Two teams two teams not having the number 1 overall pick, being forced to select the second quarterback off the draft board, and having more success with the second guy taken than the first. Caleb Williams, I think there's a lot of promise in him. But Jayden Daniels right now is so far ahead of everybody else in his own class. And to me, you can make the argument that it's one of the most talented rookie quarterback classes of all time. So that's saying something. You look last year, you see what C.J. Stroud did in his first year. And I told you by week 11, week 12, I was like, man, 2 things can be true. Bryce Young is not in the best situation. The second thing that can be true is C.J. Stroud is just a better quarterback today. And now we've observed this 2 years in a row. The second quarterback ends up being the game changer, the franchise saver, and the first guy struggles underneath the weight of his own franchise's dysfunction. And we've seen that with Bryce Young and with Caleb Williams. But Jayden Daniels is going to be a dangerous quarterback in the playoff, and I think everybody needs to be on the lookout for him. And to me, more so than Rookie of the Year or Offensive Rookie of the Year or is he a top 5 quarterback or not, everybody will talk about that. To me, what has already been proven is that Jayden Daniels is one of the most dangerous quarterbacks at the end of games. He has a major clutch gene, and to me, after Patrick Mahomes, there's no quarterback I would rather have in a 2-minute drill right now in the NFL than Jayden Daniels, and that is saying something. Let's talk about Raheem Morris and what we saw down the stretch of that game in regulation. After that big-time completion, they then rushed forward in the fourth quarter, their final possession of regulation, to try and just beat the clock, and they decide not to take a timeout when they have two. I don't want to single out Raheem Morris, but he is the head coach, and he is the one in charge of making that decision. Like, to me, it's not a coincidence that Raheem Morris, a defensive-minded head coach, down the stretch of a game that his quarterback put him in a position to win, and the rest of the team put them in a position to win a close game, the coach, who's a defensive-minded guy, who does not understand all the nuances of offense, decides and elects to not take that timeout when you do have not one in this situation, but two if you're the Falcons. And he just decides to let the clock roll and that debacle play out, and then you attempt a field goal with your backup kicker, who is not as strong when it comes to his leg as Younghoe Koo, who was sidelined because of an injury, who I think everybody found out about last night. I didn't realize he was on the injury report. That is not the best position to put your team in, your kicker in, or your quarterback in. You've got to take the timeout right there. You have the opportunity to do so. You still have another timeout after that. If you're worried about stopping the clock at midfield, if you get another completion, it makes no sense to me. Michael Penix Jr. played a really solid game, and I feel for him in the sense that he played a good enough game to win that. Jayden Daniels is on the other sideline, and he's the best closer in the NFL right now, behind maybe Patrick Mahomes, but currently right now in the regular season, behind nobody, in my opinion. Jayden Daniels, like I already told you, is in a class of his own. You've got to make that decision you can't rely on the rookie quarterback to know in that situation, and hopefully, you know what I think? I think after what we watched this season with Caleb Williams and with Michael Penix Jr., hopefully young guys, maybe even them if they get into this situation again, hopefully not. Hopefully, young guys will take the initiative to say down the stretch here, hey, my coach is letting the clock bleed out right now. We can't do that. We've got a timeout. Call timeout. And you might get screamed at in the locker room, and maybe veterans might look at you a little differently, or maybe guys will be quick to criticize because you're a young guy and you shouldn't be making a decision for the team. BS. If you are a guy who has put your team in a position to win, has played well enough, but all of a sudden because of other external factors, your team is not playing as well as you think they can, or your team is in a position to win the game and you end up not being able to do so because your coach doesn't call a timeout, call the timeout yourself. I have no problem if a quarterback is to do that in the future. I'm going to put that on record now because I don't blame I don't blame Michael Penix, and I don't blame Caleb Williams a couple weeks ago, but now we've already seen this twice in the same season. If you're a rookie quarterback, if you're a young guy under center and your coach is clearly sleeping at the wheel, make the decision for him, take the timeout, deal with the repercussions later from the media and maybe even in your own locker room, but do not let the game slip out of your hands when you have an opportunity to take a breather, stop the clock, get your best play call in, compose yourselves, and that's what I witnessed from that game. Let's talk about this, though, because I have the NFL current playoff bracket in front of me. There's a lot of websites out there that you can check out. Bleacher Report updated theirs most recently as of this morning, about 3 hours ago. Currently, it's 1:14 when we're recording this right now, so do with that information what you will. Obviously, Monday Night Football is still upon us, but right now, the Minnesota Vikings have the 1 seed. Even if the Minnesota Vikings lose next week, they will still be in the playoff, and they have had a tremendous season. And I think when you watch that team, I told you, I think on the last show about how I felt about Sam Darnold and the decision that the Vikings are going to have to make. You watch that Minnesota Vikings team, how they march downfield with Sam Darnold and the confidence that he's playing with right now and the confidence that the team has in him and how many weapons they have beyond just Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. You see that there was a young man whose name slips my mind right now. I think it was Nailton or Paleton is his last name, who had the touchdown in the corner, had a big-time play and catch over the middle to keep things going on a drive that they really needed to down the stretch. That Minnesota Vikings team has no lack of weapons, no lack of talent. They have an excellent defense. Brian Flores, for whatever you may think about him from his Miami days and the perception we had of him, it's an amazing defensive mind. Pittsburgh really lost out when they let him walk out the door. That is one of the most complete football teams in the league. To me, my only concern with the Minnesota Vikings is and this is a significant one, is not even Sam Darnold. It's their run game, because so many of the best teams in the NFC and, of course, in the playoffs have excellent run games. That's my one worry with the Minnesota Vikings down the stretch. But I love Kevin O'Connell. I love that defense. I love Brian Flores. And I love Sam Darnold right now. And I think he is not necessarily he's not the only reason they're winning, but he is certainly a part of it. And to me, there's a lot of talk, and I talked about it on this show, and I discussed it, I think, a few weeks ago, maybe even with a guest of mine. What's going to happen with Sam Darnold here down the stretch? Do you decide to let him walk? Do you pay him? To me, it is not going to come down to it's going to come down to the playoffs, yes. But I already believe, forget the playoffs. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to win a playoff game, and I would stand on it today, and I would sign an affidavit saying that I said that. But so many people are going to wait for the postseason to say, you know what, are they going to pay Sam Darnold? Are they going to let him stick around? To me, this Minnesota Vikings team is good enough to win a playoff game, whether it's against the Detroit Lions or against the Buccaneers. Whoever ends up making it out of that bracket, whether they have to fight the Bucs to get to the Detroit Lions or fight maybe the Bucs first to then get to the Lions, they're going to win a playoff game, because that team is so well-oiled right now. This is one of the best teams in football. And to me, the question is not going to be, the Vikings will end up asking, well, are we going to keep Sam Darnold or are we going to let him walk? It's going to be how much. The question is going to become, how much are we going to pay Sam Darnold to stay once this Minnesota Vikings team wins a playoff game with Sam Darnold? Because it's going to happen. This team is explosive. They're one of the most fun teams to watch, and they're one of the best teams in the NFC right now. And they should be on everybody's radar if they're not already. And I know there was a lot of talk on the broadcast yesterday about how disrespected they are as a 13-win team at the time, now a 14-win team. But that team is really talented, and I'm already willing to say that Minnesota Vikings team is going to win a playoff game. And at that point, the question is not going to be, do we keep Sam Darnold or do we let him walk? The question is going to be, how much? Is it 40? Is it 45? Is it 50? Is it 55? Is it 57? I do not create the quarterback market, so don't get mad at me. But the Minnesota Vikings are going to end up keeping Sam Darnold because he is going to win a playoff game, and I can attest to that right now. And at that point, how much of a discount is Sam Darnold willing to take, and how much are the Vikings willing to give? But it's going to happen, and you're going to stick with Sam Darnold because I know you drafted J.J. McCarthy, but why would you try to get happier than happy? Sometimes you've got to be willing to acknowledge what's right in front of you, and this Sam Darnold situation for the Minnesota Vikings that fell into their lap this offseason, even though they didn't expect it to play out this way, you can't just let that walk out the door. That is a very impressive situation, a great coach. People always say that guys like KOC, they mention luck. That is a team that has been great in close games since Kevin O'Connell walked through that door in Minnesota. And I said it in his first season with Kirk Cousins when people were saying, oh, it's luck that they're winning these close games. It's not skill. I believe that winning close games is a skill, and I believe that KOC has that in the same way that Andy Reid and the Chiefs had that, and the same way that the Patriots had that during their dynasty. It's interesting how the best teams who are the best coached seem to always have the best luck down the stretch. Spoiler, it's not luck. So speaking of luck, Drew Lock. So this is a story here. Drew Lock, after that win by the Giants to put them out of draft position, he understands the desire for a top pick, but he said, we're going to keep pushing. They ended their 11-game losing streak with this game. Drew Lock threw for 309, had 5 touchdowns, led the Giants to a victory, 45-33 against the Colts, who I'll talk about in a second because I want to say my good friend, but not my good friend, someone who I admire, and Pat McAfee absolutely murked them on Twitter yesterday. But first, let's talk about the Giants, because the Giants, to me, it's like, man, what are you going to do? I do not blame Drew Lock, and I do not blame Malik Neighbors, and I do not blame the New York Giants for just deciding, you know what, we're going to go out with a bang, and we're going to win a game. I'm not going to get mad at players for trying to win a football game when it's their careers on the line. You don't know how long it's going to be. And I don't expect players to buy in on a tanking campaign in any way, shape, or form. So I know Giants fans are pissed off at Drew Lock, but I would in no way, shape, or form blame Drew Lock for this. He's doing his job. That team was doing their job. Everybody understands, yeah, this team is not really going anywhere in terms of postseason success, but they still have a chance to win a game, and they won a game, and I think it was good for that locker room to try and rally them at the end of the season. Now, if I was a Giants fan, would I be pissed because we're missing out on the opportunity to draft a potential franchise savior in a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward? Yes, because now you're taking yourself out of position. Currently, Tankathon has the Giants at 4. Even if they lose next week, I don't think they're going to get higher than 3, is the way that the math works out. So this is the Giants team that, because of that win against the Colts, has taken themselves out of the running for an elite quarterback. And they really can't trade up because Joe Schoen, first of all, he needs to be fired after this season and after the offseason, which we witnessed on Hard Knocks, letting Saquon Barkley walk out the door. And now Saquon has an opportunity, if he decides to play or if the Eagles allow him to play, because I know Saquon said it's going to be Nick Sirianni's decision, Saquon could break the all-time leading rushing record in the Giants' home stadium, or against the Giants at least. Like, that team needs a complete overhaul. But right now, you're not in a position to, even if you fire Brian Daboll and even if you fire the GM and Joe Schoen, like, Mara doesn't have enough assets here to trade up to get a really good pick in terms of 1 or 2. The only asset that the Giants currently have, it's not Drew Lock, it's Malik Neighbors, and I don't think they would be dumb enough to trade him. Now, I say I don't think because Joe Schoen has made some terrible decisions over the last 18 months, on the field and off, during regular season and off season, but they cannot jump up high enough in the order here to get one of these guys. So what are you going to do? I personally don't know what they do. I think the Giants, because of that game, have ended up putting themselves in a position where you've got to go for the B-tier guys like a Russell Wilson or a Kirk Cousins or even a Justin Fields, depending on how things shake out in both Pittsburgh and Atlanta. I end up thinking I would lean today towards the fact that the Atlanta Falcons end up cutting Kirk Cousins because I don't think he has a big enough market for a trade, and I think teams will just let the Atlanta Falcons cut him. I don't think anybody's going to trade any sort of picks for that. A guy who's in his 40s, coming off an Achilles tear and a pretty poor season down the stretch here. His value's in the tank. The tape at the end of the year is just really bad. His confidence is shot. Nobody's trading assets for that, so if you're this Giants team, you've taken yourself out of the running for a generational quarterback, and now you're at a point where you've got to side with somebody else, and it sucks for them because it looks like Shedeur Sanders was excited to go to the Giants, had cleats that were Giants colors, and potentially had the Giants logo on them. I haven't verified that part. I know the cleats that were seen in Shedeur's locker room were Giants colors, but the pictures that came out of the cleats after the fact, I don't know. I know they had the Giants logo on the picture, but I don't know if those are the exact cleats that Shedeur Sanders had in his locker room, so I need to verify that. I don't know if anybody has. I think everybody's just jumping to the conclusion that those were the cleats, and maybe they were, don't get me wrong, but I never saw from that angle the picture that came out of Shedeur's cleats in his locker room. Did they have the Giants logo on the corner or not? I don't know, but it felt like it was a marriage made in heaven, and now the Giants have essentially robbed themselves from that opportunity because they decided to get a win against a POS Colts team. So let's go there. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. I had so much faith in this team under Shane Steichen, and I really thought they would turn it around. And I knew that the Anthony Richardson thing was a wild card pick, and I knew it was all potential, but this has gone so much more poorly than I thought it would. And this actually loops in perfectly with the Giants to me because I feel the same way about the Shane Steichen-led Colts that I do Brian Daboll. You're either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And I have a lot of faith in those guys. Schematically, I think they're great offensive minds, but neither of them right now is head coach material, and I think you could definitely say that. I think both need to be fired in order to move on as a franchise, both respectively the Giants and the Colts. And the Colts more specifically, you've got to get rid of Ballard. You've got to consider getting rid of Shane Steichen, even if it hurts, because I do think he is a great offensive mind, but you've got to clean house. Because you know what I think is the biggest indictment on the Colts right now in that Pat McAfee tweet? It's the fact that Pat, for months, if you're a fan of his, which I am, I watch the show all the time, I have no shame in saying that. Pat, one of Pat McAfee's superpowers, or what makes him unique as a media member, is the fact that he always, not second guesses, but second questions every report he hears. He always jokes around, what's the angle? Why are we hearing this information? Who is it coming from? And what does it really mean? What is the end goal of this information getting out? So Pat McAfee, when it comes to rumors, especially things that happen in locker rooms, is always very he questions it a lot. And it's led me to question things that I hear, which I think is good. I don't think we should take everything at face value, especially if they're anonymous reports in the NFL or anywhere for that matter. But for Pat McAfee to say in his tweet, after he has said for months, talking about players missing treatment, talking about players being late for treatment, talking about players just not showing up for treatment, being late to team meetings. These things that we've heard in the Colts locker room, for Pat McAfee, who always questions every report that comes out and the authenticity of it and the reason why it's coming out, for him to mention those things as the reasons why he is a former Colts player, doesn't believe in this team, that leads me to believe that Pat knows more than he's letting on. And Pat's not being secretive, that's not what I'm saying, but he definitely has sources in his own building, in his old building, because he talked about it on the tweet, if you read the entire thing, where he said, I feel for the front office, I feel for the current staff members, I feel for the people who work in that stadium who are not directly like players or on the front office staff. Like, there's people who've been there for a long time, and I think Pat's pretty plugged in. And I think the biggest indictment on this Colts team right now is the fact that Peyton Manning, Pat McAfee, even to a certain extent Andrew Luck, the guys who are the cornerstones of your franchise, at least publicly now, years later, they seem to have no relationship with the current team or ownership. That is an indictment on the team. That is an indictment on the Colts ownership. That is an indictment on who they have become over the past few years. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, but something's got to give. And, you know, I talk about Shane Steichen. I talk about Ballard. And next on that list, I think you've got to change ownership. And I don't know how loud it's going to get for Jim Irsay or not. I don't live in Indy, but I think it's going to get loud. And I think you saw an outcry from fans yesterday and an outpouring of support for change, or an outpouring of a call for change. And I don't know if it gets any better under Irsay. I don't think he's a great NFL owner. I think he's an old school guy that, quite frankly, just makes decisions off a whim. I don't think they're very well thought through. I think the wrong people are in his ear, if I had to take a guess. And to me, like, you've got to move away from who you are right now for the Colts. You've got to rid house of everybody. And to be honest, like, amongst the different decisions that I would made, Anthony Richardson, like, to me, I don't think you can trade for him. I would consider moving Anthony Richardson out of his current position. I'm not kidding. Put him at running back. Put him somewhere on the defense. His athleticism, his size, his physical capabilities, throw him in somewhere else, because he's a football guy, I would assume. But he's not a quarterback in the NFL. And I think Shane Steichen is one of the best developers of the quarterback position, and he was a guy who mentored Jalen Hurts to become who he is today. If he couldn't fix Anthony Richardson, I don't know who can, because I think Shane, for his build and for his body type and for his playing style, was arguably the best coach he could have ever gotten if he was going to be the guy there. And I said that from the beginning, which is why I said it either works out in Indy or it doesn't work out at all. It's not the coaching is the problem situation in Indy. It is he's just not the right guy. Nobody can develop him. So we'll see what happens there. Last thing here, because I'm running out of time. I like to keep these shows under 30 minutes, and so I'm going to go quick here to finish this thing off. A lot of criticism coming out about Cam Ward and him sitting out the second half for the Miami Hurricanes in that game, the bowl game, the Pop-Tart Bowl against Iowa State. Let me make this very clear. Cam Ward had zero obligation to the Miami Hurricanes in the Pop-Tart Bowl to try and save them from their own dysfunction. Cam Ward saved the Miami Dolphins. Cam Ward saved the Miami Hurricanes all season long and bailed them out more times than they deserved. And what did he get for it? He got to go to the Pop-Tart Bowl. He couldn't even have an opportunity to play in the 12-team college football playoff. Remember, this was the first year of the 12-team playoff. It wasn't 4 teams. It wasn't 8 teams. 12 teams had the opportunity to make it in. And for the year where the Miami Hurricanes have the best quarterback they've ever had, statistically, physically, in terms of their capabilities, the tape, and for that team to not be good enough to rally around him to push that into the playoff, he couldn't do it alone, and that's what it came down to. And I have zero problem with Cam Ward deciding to sit out the second half of a game where he is knocking on the door of $40 to $50 million in his first contract with the NFL draft upon us, and potentially, if he plays well, a $250 million contract down the line for him in the NFL. Cam Ward had zero obligation to the Hurricanes to help out Miami or to bail them out once again when he did that all year long, and he was the reason for all of those, for their 10 wins down the stretch of the season. Like, he couldn't have done anything more, and fans are pissed off because it ruins the integrity of the game, or it's going to ruin the integrity of the game down the line because he decides to sit out the second half. It is not his job to save the Miami Hurricanes because they couldn't fight for him. So he should not be obligated to fight for them down the stretch of a meaningless Pop-Tart Bowl game that, quite frankly, after watching, they didn't deserve to be in anyway. And I know it was a one-point game. I'm telling you what I saw. As someone from Miami, as someone who has watched that team all year long, begrudgingly, who has many ties to that team, pathetic. Cam Ward did not deserve the hate that he got for sitting at the second half of that game. He had no obligation to save the Miami Hurricanes. Okay, I'm going to go quickly with this one because we don't have a lot of time. Aaron Rodgers in 2025. I think the Jets cut him. I think the Steelers end up ultimately picking him up. I think that's where that ends up going. I don't think they want to get married to Russell Wilson's contract or what he has to offer them. I think it's come to a point where we're now seeing that Mike Tomlin doesn't want to get married to mediocrity, even though many people say that that's what his coaching career has been here down the stretch. But, you don't want to give Russell Wilson a long-term contract. I don't think they have enough faith in Justin Fields to exactly marry him either and, sign a long-term deal, if you will. I think Aaron Rodgers on a one-year rental, just have the guy who loves to throw touchdowns, throws very few picks. Aaron, if nothing else, is efficient. They're going to ask the least amount of Aaron Rodgers as what's been asked of him over the past several years. Aaron Rodgers is going to be asked to do less than ever with the Steelers, and for that reason, it might work. Aaron Rodgers is allergic to turning the ball over. Mike Tomlin loves that. They have a lot of mutual respect for each other, as we've seen through the sound bites in the press conference, quotes over the past few months. I think it would be a good partnership. One last ride for these guys. I think that's the way it works out. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers. I just thought of that over the weekend. I saw some reports about it, and I thought, that's not nothing. With that being said, that is all for this week's show. We've got a great Monday Night Football game tonight. Can't wait to see how it plays out. Can't wait to see how next week Vikings-Detroit Lions plays out. Of course, Lions playing tonight against, I believe, the 49ers. That should be an interesting one. But yeah, should be a great win down the stretch here. The wild card and the playoffs are upon us, so don't go anywhere. Can't wait.